brought you the story of the Cradys, a local family who said they were wrongly accused of child abuse. Well, since then, many of you have been commenting online. Caitlin joins us with more from the newsroom in part 2 of her special report, Accused. Caitlin?
That's right, Tyler. In a story that we posted to our Facebook page on the topic previously, we saw more than 80 comments, 40 of those from people who claimed that they experienced a similar situation, citing, much like the Cradys, medical explanations they said mimicked signs of abuse. So we did some digging deeper to see if this was possible. We found 2 more stories with local connections, including a Peoria mother who said she was turning the allegations she once faced into a mission to help others.
Our youngest son was born with a wide range of medical issues related to an undiagnosed rare genetic condition.
Peoria mom Michelle Widener says that led doctors at OSF St. Francis Medical Center to perform a CAT scan on the then 5-week-old, who she's asked we not name. But the outcome of that scan left Widener and her husband in utter disbelief.
When they did the CT scan, he moved in the machine, which resulted in a blurred line, and that blurred line was misdiagnosed as a skull fracture.
Unfortunately, the Wideners wouldn't learn there was an issue with the scan till much later. Instead, in that moment, they found themselves accused.
And the child abuse pediatrician told investigators that there was no other explanation than blunt force trauma.
That child abuse pediatrician was Dr. Channing Petrak, the medical director for the Pediatric Resource Center, and the same doctor involved in the Crady case. The Wideners say following the allegations of abuse, they were unable to be alone with their newborn son or their 2 older children for 2 weeks. During that time, they sought out a second opinion at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital.
They were able to decide with 100% accuracy that there was no skull fracture.
But it still took 3 months for DCFS to close the investigation, notifying the family the report of abuse was unfounded. Today, their youngest is 8 and is doing well, enjoying time with his 2 older brothers. And while he doesn't remember that dark time, his parents still do. However, it's prompted Michelle to fight for other families who are accused of abuse, now serving as the executive director of the newly formed Family Justice Resource Center.
Sometimes they get it wrong. And when they get it wrong, there is no recourse for parents. And the Family Justice Resource Center wants to be the place to turn when the state gets it wrong.
Also on the FJRC board, Diane Redleaf, an attorney out of Chicago. She's written a just-published book on the subject, profiling 6 families titled, "They Took the Kids Last Night, How the Child Protection System Puts Families at Risk."
The cases were all stories of families where the child welfare system came in and literally took the kids one night.
Redleaf estimates she's worked on anywhere from 70 to 100 cases involving families whose children allegedly had medical conditions that were mistaken for abuse.
I believe that any family could be subject to something like this, and people need to basically have a wake-up call that this is occurring.
Right now, the FJRC says they are handling 11 open cases across the state. But they say it's difficult to track how many allegations of child abuse are proven false, partly because no one keeps track of that. Redleaf and Widener also say many parents take plea deals or later say they were coerced into a confession. A Springfield father, Richard Britt, says that's what happened to him years ago. He recalls watching TV one night back in 2010 when his 3-month-old daughter, Sanaya, started gasping for air in her crib.
I just didn't know what to do. She was lifeless. She was still gasping, breathing very weird.
The little girl was transported to OSF in Peoria, where doctors determined she had bleeding on the brain, prompting Dr. Petrak to conclude Sanaya had been either shaken or hit. Britt says he protested and told staff seizures ran in his family. Ultimately, though, he was arrested and taken to the Sangamon County Jail after he claims he was coerced into a confession without an attorney present.
I didn't know what was happening. Again, I was 19, and they were just telling me that everything that I did was inaccurate, and it didn't answer their questions. I'm like, I'm not a doctor. I don't have answers for you.
Britt spent more than 2 years in that jail awaiting trial, where he was eventually found not guilty after a medical expert from out of state testified Sanaya did, in fact, suffer from a seizure disorder. Since then, he says he's rebuilt his life and enjoys time with Sanaya, who made a full recovery, along with her 3 sisters. But he says nothing can replace the time that was taken from him.
That's 2.5 years I'll never get back. I had to reestablish the relationships with my children. I don't know, man. I lost a lot.
Hoping to spare other families that fate, the FJRC says they want to help connect parents to medical experts with insight into diseases and conditions that mimic abuse. We asked one of the experts the FJRC uses, a radiologist out of Springfield, to weigh in on how this could be possible.
I think when you look at the specialty of child abuse pediatrics, you are geared up to protect children in harm's way. And so one of the first things you see, in other words, if you're, a nail, everything's a hammer, or vice versa, but it's one of the first things you think about.
Dr. David Ayub says he's studied metabolic bone disease, rickets, and vitamin D deficiencies extensively and believes those conditions can often mimic abuse. As a result, he testifies in cases all over the country. As we've previously stated, we've tried reaching out to Dr. Petrak for a response, since she's the designated child abuse pediatrician in Central Illinois. But her employer, the University of Illinois College of Medicine, said they couldn't comment on or provide patient information, citing privacy concerns. But a fellow child abuse pediatrician out of Minnesota, who's unaffiliated with any of the local cases we've profiled, did speak to us.
Many of the theories that are proposed for alternate explanations for injuries are not accepted by really any of the major professional medical organizations.
Still, members of the Family Justice Resource Center say that's part of the problem, claiming many child abuse pediatricians are quick to dismiss other theories and have the final say if injuries are suspicious of abuse. Dr. Mark Hudson did confirm that child abuse pediatricians ultimately make that diagnosis, but he said they do first consult with other specialists. However, he also admitted that doctors can sometimes get it wrong.
Of course, with any medical diagnosis, there can be misdiagnosis. Most commonly, what we see in medicine is that abuse is missed.
That's a sentiment shared by the medical director for the Pediatric Emergency Department at OSF. Dr. Teresa Reish points out that healthcare workers are considered mandated reporters, meaning they're legally obligated to point out anything that's suspicious of abuse. She says not doing so can lead to fatal consequences in some cases.
Of those children that die from child abuse, 80% are related to abusive head trauma, and often they present sometimes multiple times to healthcare providers before abuse is identified.
That's why Reish says it's so important to identify red flags early on and then hand that over to a child abuse pediatrician, DCFS, and law enforcement to review. Still, she admits these cases aren't always black and white.
Sometimes those injuries, sometimes things will present that appear to be abuse that are, rarely are mimics of abuse. And there are lots of medical conditions that abuse can sort of masquerade as, so it's very tricky.
But Widener and the Family Justice Resource Center claim that's why they're working to increase the accuracy of abuse investigations and ensure that parents are provided with due process.
Wrongful allegations are often considered collateral damage in the fight against child abuse.
So since Michelle is the executive director of the FJRC, we asked, well, what do you recommend parents do should they find themselves in that situation? She said, immediately get an attorney and ask for your child's records right away. We've got their contact information on our website as well.
It's a tough situation for so many mandatory reporters, like teachers, too. We may see something and wonder for days, who do I tell this to and what happens if I do? A lot of things to think about.
A difficult topic to talk about, that's for sure.
We definitely